Actually, that's where I'm going to have to kindly correct you.
So this is teaching for women. So Romans 13 is actually really clear, okay? We are to obey the governments, but you did bring up some scripture that yes, you're to obey God over man. So if your government is telling you to break one of the commandments of God, you're to obey God over man. So if your government is forcing you to bow to the image of Baal, you are to obey God over man, not breaking his commandments. But you have not judged the cause of the fatherless and the widow. You don't understand that Jehovah appoints the leaders over his people to also punish them. They're a reflection of the people. I mean, go look in the Old Testament. He told them to cleanse the land, right? And if they didn't cleanse the land, that there would be briars and thorns that would grow with them, with the wheat, that would become their oppressors. Because Ephraim, America, the land of the pride, the drunkards, there's no place clean, because the Jeremiah 23 pastors, Ezekiel 34 pastors have scattered his flock, teaching burden of the Lord that you don't have to keep the 10 Commandments. You don't have to be obedient unto God, turning the grace of God into lasciviousness. Sin has abounded. And this is why we have the wicked government we have today. Because the people are wicked. And that's why we have famine and wars, which are the cause of the fatherless and the widow. Jehovah told his people if they did not obey him, they would suffer his wrath. He put his people in captivity when they went a whoring and started worshiping other gods over him. They were to take down all the idols and cleanse the land. But today, you see, even in Israel, is completely polluted. America, completely full of idolatry. They actually pushed their idolatry to the four corners of the world. And their sins have reached to the heavens. So, yes, we are to obey God over our government if they are causing you or forcing you to sin, break the commandments of God. But if they're not asking you and telling you you have to break the commandments of God, you're not to rail against them, because it is the cause and the results of the people's disobedience to Jehovah. He's punishing his people. He's letting the briars and the thorns oppress his people because they will not hearken unto him. They will not be obedient unto him and keep his commandments. They refuse to worship him in spirit and in truth, which is keeping his Sabbath day, dawn Saturday to dawn Sunday, keeping the commandments in their heart and teaching them to their children. They're full of covetousness. They're lovers of themselves, truth breakers, covenant breakers, disobedience to parents. and have been turned on to fables. 1 Timothy chapter 3 and 4. They do idolatry and bring it into the house, which is called by his name, and then say they're delivered to do those abominations. Jeremiah chapter 7. Jeremiah 10 with their Christmas and their Easter. Having other gods before Jehovah. Turning, holding the truth in unrighteousness, Romans 1. Worshipping the creature more than the creator. Turning the uncorruptible God into an image of a corruptible man, 2 Thessalonians 2. Elevating the Son to be God, saying that Jesus is God, the man of perdition, the opposite himself of Jehovah, who sits in the people's temple because they've asked him into their hearts. The children of perdition. They deny the prophets. For the servants of Jehovah, in Revelations 19, hold the testimony of Yeshua and the testimony of Yeshua's prophecy. They do not deny the prophets. They do not deny what the prophets wrote that the Messiah would do, which is magnify the law, make it honorable. Love God, love neighbor. Deuteronomy chapter 6, keep the covenants at Horeb. It will be your righteousness. Deuteronomy 5, and love your neighbor. Do righteous judgment. Leviticus 19:15 through 18. Reprove the world of sin. John 16. But they don't do that. They say, judge not or be judged. And there's over 46,000 different denominations that proclaim to be Christian. All disobedience, all lovers of themselves, covenant breakers, truth breakers, that worship with their hands. Full of idolatry. That is why you have a wicked government. But yes, Revelations 13 says not to rail against it. It's your punishment, take it. Because you're naked, wretched, and poor. But those who are walking in righteousness, doing the will of the Father, they don't have to fear their governments. They don't have to fear them. Revelations 13. So stop twisting the scripture, because it doesn't, you are to obey God over man, yes, but you're not to rail against your government, because you are railing against Jehovah and his punishment that he puts on his people for their disobedience. So you are railing against God when you rail against your government. If you go out and protest against your government. So stop twisting the scripture.